All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started, and we're really appreciate folks for coming in and joining us today. Um, my name is Sean Sebastian, and I'm the Director of Organizing at ruralorganizing.org. We, as you may know, are a national network of 600,000 people who've taken action with us, 80,000 advocates, and 4,000 civic leaders and organizers. We're really excited to have you here today. Over 200 people registered for this call to get connected with these resources and to learn about movement safety. That's really incredible. The response is a testament to the hunger in our network and across the country for this type of information and these tools on staying safe while staying vocal. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to dig in. So I'm going to introduce you to our trainer for this evening, Stephen Smith. Stephen is one of the co-founders of West Virginia Can't Wait, a statewide political machine founded in 2019 that now has 29 of its pro-labor, no corporate cash, anti-establishment candidates serving in elected office. This training was put together by the West Virginia Can't Wait team based on years of working to protect elected officials, harm reductionists, and organizers from militant white supremacists and wealthy politicians. Stephen lives in Charleston, West Virginia with his wife, prison abolitionist Sarah Whitaker, and their 12-year-old son, Jackson. Stephen.
Thanks, Sean. Welcome, everyone. I am really honored and excited to be with y'all tonight. I am also under the weather, so bear with me if I get a little groggy or foggy over the next couple of hours. But I wasn't going to miss this training for the world. I think that what ruralorganizing.org does, and I know from experience working with that organization with some of you, the work that y'all are doing in communities is the most important work, and it's almost always underfunded and underappreciated. So I'm here to appreciate it and to lend some of what we're learning on the ground in West Virginia over the next couple of hours. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to share my screen, a Zoom that might make it easier to sort of follow along. So bear with me. I'm going to bring that up and we'll get started. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to name and debunk some stereotypes about what security means. We are hopefully going to each walk away with a few concrete tips, actions, stories, choices that we can make when we face a threat. There'll even be an opportunity for folks to interact a little bit about a threat that each of us might be facing in our communities. I also want to learn more about the threats that you're facing in your states, and there'll be an opportunity to fill out a survey, both to give us information about what you're facing and what kind of information and training you want in the future at the end of the workshop. By the end of the workshop, we hope that some of you will be interested in doing more of this. Sean and I and a few other folks are working on a training program that'll launch in August, application in July. You'll hear more about that. And then finally, we're here to just sort of offer some courage and appreciation for one another. One of the things we found in West Virginia trying to fight the battles we're fighting is that the most dangerous thing we can do is be alone. So hopefully we each leave today with at least an inkling to reach out to someone else, whether it's me or Sean or someone else on this call or someone back home that might be able to help you out in whatever threat you're facing. I want to offer a little bit of introduction about myself and West Virginia Can't Wait, just so you know sort of where we're coming from. So I'm Stephen. I'm a co-chair of West Virginia Can't Wait. I want to be very clear that I have no formal training in security, or very, very little, but have been trying to learn. And that's the spirit in which we come to this training and some of the other workshops we've done is, for the most part, we are not trained experts in all kinds of different security terminology. What we are is a bunch of people who've been under attack for a long time, and our allies and harm reductionists and organizers and elected officials have also been under attack. And we've tried to learn from those experiences and hopefully share some of that learning with you. Maybe like some of you, I'm also here as a survivor of childhood violence, and someone who is not just interested in protecting myself and my family, but am part of a team of other people that we're trying to protect. A lot of the work that we've done over the years is protecting elected officials who are outsiders and radicals and people from underrepresented communities. We've also worked a lot with harm reductionists. My main path into this work was working with a harm reduction program in Charleston, West Virginia, which is, as some of you may know, the center of the overdose crisis, where we've been fighting a Democratic city council that's criminalized syringe exchange and harm reduction. And so this training borrows from experience with nonprofits, with grassroots harm reduction, and with elected officials. So you'll hear some of pieces of those stories throughout the evening. I want to give 2 or 3 minute introduction to what West Virginia Can't Wait is. Maybe like some of your organizations, we say that we are not interested in persuading those in power. We're interested in replacing them. And what that means to us is that we recruit, train, fund, and support candidates for office. We govern alongside them. A lot of what we do is sort of offer like rural volunteer staffs to city councilors and county commissioners and school board members who are trying to govern in a different kind of way. And then we also back the people who do the work that government fails to do. As might be true in some of your states, public institutions in West Virginia are weak and getting weaker. So a lot of what we do is try to wrap our arms around, like I said, those harm reductionists and tenants unions and workers' rights groups that are stepping in where government has failed. This is a little snapshot of what that looks like. This is the map of West Virginia. You'll see candidates, mutual aid heroes. This was before this latest election cycle when we were only at 23 elected officials. We do work with citizen journalists and organizer apprentices, and our work is very scattered. It's very distributed across the state. We're mostly led by volunteers. The story of our security work then is our first election cycle was 2020, and we got 11 of our people over the finish line into public office. And almost immediately, some of them, especially our trans electeds and our Black electeds, were targeted by white supremacists online, and we feared more and more offline as well. And so the first year of our security work was just scrambling, trying to learn whatever we could, trying to get funding for people to get basic security at their homes and in public events. From there, we started saying, well, it'd be great if we could be a little more proactive. So we started doing security briefings for like organizations and locations and candidates sort of before they were opening or before people ran for office. And we tried to do some of that prep work. And then most recently, we've just found that as the threats to our people's safety grow and as the uncertainty and cruelty in the world increase, these kinds of services are more needed. And so this past spring, we held our first 5-day community defender training, which was like intensive skills sharing with about 27 of our people and then a few folks from other states as well. So that's a little bit about our security work. One last bit of introduction before we get into this is just to make some offerings that the next hour and a half for some of us will be a nice, fun online training, and we'll learn a couple things. For others of us, it might be a moment where we feel past traumas or cruelties or harms bubbling up inside of us. And if that happens for you, we just want to invite everyone on the call to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. If that means turning your video off for a time, if it means hopping off the line and reaching out to me or Sean afterwards, if it means piping up and asking a question or going to the chat or just taking a breather, all of that is welcome. We're also going to try to limit distractions as much as possible. It will be helpful if you are a note taker to bring out pen and paper like I've got, or if you prefer to take notes on your phone, you're welcome to do that. But there will be a number of moments throughout the training where you'll get a chance to reflect or write and share with other folks. So we encourage folks to do that. We also invite, and we do this with all of our trainings, to take what you need and leave the rest. That what safety means to each of us is going to be different. And therefore, what we do to seek it is also going to be different. And so my hope is that you leave today with 2 or 3 things that feel right for you and a whole bunch of other things that you leave in this hour and a half, maybe never to think about again. So we have no doubt that the context in West Virginia and what we're doing with our people, we hope will resonate. And we have no doubt that in some cases it won't. And we just invite you, if something doesn't feel right, to leave it be. Finally, this doesn't end today. You're going to get my information at the end of this training, as well as an opportunity to stay involved in this work and potentially apply to be a part of this program. But anyone who is, for whom this kicks up feelings or emotions, or you want to strategize, there will be more opportunities after today, and I hope you take them. Pardon me. So, just to wrap up our introduction, we're going to practice using those notes, however you want to take them. I just want to ask each person to take a minute, we'll just take a minute in silence, to think about one reason or one person why you are here tonight, just to kind of ground ourselves in this moment and why we're here. So for me, one person that I'm here for is one of our candidates in Wheeling, trying to be the first transgender elected mayor in West Virginia history. And I'm thinking about her as part of how I'm coming to this training. For you, it might be yourself, it might be a friend or family member. Just want to encourage folks to take a moment. You want to take notes, whatever you need to do to ground yourself in one person or one reason why you're here this evening. If you want to write it in the chat, you can, but no pressure. And then we'll start shortly after that. Okay, so I mentioned that the first goal for this evening is to try to name and debunk some stereotypes about what security means. I don't know if y'all have found this, but for us over the last few years, as we've built the security program, one of the things we've learned is that our people have a very different definition and a very different idea and experience of what safety and security even means than the definition that is often given to us by our opponents. And so if I can ask folks to go to the chat, and we're just going to do a little brainstorm, a little check-in. So the question, the prompt is, imagine the first things images, people, words that come to mind when you think of security in a traditional sense, when you think of the images of security that have been handed to us. You might think of images we see in movies and TV and the news. We want to get these images out of our system and up on the chat. So take a minute or two, and then as you think of something, again, maybe it's an image, maybe it's a word, what are the sort of traditional images or the mainstream or the establishment images that we receive when it comes to security? And go ahead and put those in the chat. Let's just sort of see the chat light up a little bit. Normally I'd ask someone to read these, but I'll just shout some of them out. Weapons, cameras and guns, uniformed officers, quote unquote good guy with a gun, metal detectors, police officers, guns, uniforms, bodyguards, armed guards, sirens, alarm systems, flashing lights, sounds, guards, people who arrest or hurt first and ask questions later, law enforcement, cops, guns, surveillance cameras. What do folks, I'm going to open it up. You can unmute yourself if you want. What do folks notice or think about when you look at this list? What stands out to you?
Control.
Paul, did you say control?
Yeah.
Say more about that.
Well, there'll be somebody in control of a situation or in an environment.
Yeah, well said. What else? Someone else. What stands out to you when you look at this list?
Intimidation.
Yeah. Terry, what do you mean when you say intimidation? Say a little more.
We all know it's to scare you. It's to scare you into not doing something.
Yeah, it's one of the things we found too is that a lot of what we've been taught is about either being fearless or being frightening, right? Like using fear as a weapon. Thank you for that. One more person. What do you see when you look at this list?
I think people have really a misconception of security. And what I mean about that is, like, I've done public safety before. I do security at our church. We try to just be as non-conspicuous as possible. Blend in with the crowd. Nobody knows we're there. Nobody's threatened by our presence.
Excellent point, Len. This is what we noticed when we started asking ourselves all of what's just been said and more. And what it sort of amounted to for us as we were building this training and trying to figure out how to respond to threats is that we were going to have to look for ways of achieving safety that were different from what we had received from the dominant culture. And some of what we would learn would come from our own experience, and some of what we would learn would come from security and safety professionals that were doing things in a different way. But that's what we're going to get into with this training is we are going to look at some of what we've been told security is and some of what we think, what we are learning it means to us. So just to summarize, some of what we had experienced was that security is about being fearless or frightening, that it's often projected as a lone hero or protector. People talked about someone being in control, a good guy with a gun. It's sort of an individual cowboy. We're often presented with security or safety being presented in a react and strike, a way that sort of centers violence, which is the opposite of what we are interested in doing. We want to reduce violence, not escalate it. And that finally, a lot of what we had heard about security was that you had to have outside expertise, that we, people who had been part of generations that have been kicked in the teeth by powerful interests, that our experience wasn't worthwhile, that what you needed is a very specific set of skills, as the saying goes. So what this training does and what our program has done over the last few years is try to challenge some of these assumptions and replace them with an idea of safety that works more with our values. And I'm going to go through those one at a time. There's 4 here in a moment. But first, I want to ask folks to take a couple minutes right now and to write down on your sheet of paper one threat that you are currently facing, or one threat that you or your organization could imagine facing soon. Maybe you've got a couple, that's fine, but go ahead and write down 1 or 2 threats that you're either facing or could imagine facing soon. And what we found is that can be helpful, excuse me, as we're going through the training to sort of have a specific instance in mind. So take a moment to do that. I'm going to get some more water, and then we'll go through each of these 4 lessons learned and what they look like. I'll be right back. Okay. So hopefully everyone has, hopefully no one has a threat in mind because you aren't facing any real threats, but more likely, you've now got some instance in your mind, something that's happening in your organization, or perhaps to you personally or someone you care about. And we're going to walk through these 4 lessons or alternative ways of looking at security. So I'm going to summarize them and go through them one at a time. Again, the first is we've heard being fearless or frightening is sometimes the message we receive. The message we've learned is we actually want to listen to our fears, that our fears are valuable and that we want to lean into them. Instead of a lone hero or protector, we are going to always seek a community of support, looking for roles for all kinds of people and bringing more and more of our folks to moments of danger so that we aren't alone. Instead of react and strike, we are going to seek whenever possible to avoid and prevent. And then instead of thinking that expertise can only come from outside our organizations, we are going to lean on the wisdom and experience of generations, including the lived experience that we have. So here's what that looks like. We're going to go through these one at a time, and I'm going to just tell a couple stories about what it's looked like for us, then give y'all a chance to reflect, tell a couple stories, reflect. We'll go back and forth, and then after this block of these 4 sort of pillars, we'll have a chance to get into small groups and share some ideas about which of these might be useful in your context. So first is this idea of being, instead of being fearless or frightening, we're going to try to listen to our fears. One of the things that can happen, we saw over and over as we were getting attacked, our candidates were getting attacked, is that we tended to feel in that moment of attack as if we had no options, right? There was sort of, our fear was driving us, or our desire to be fearless was driving us into fight, flight, or freeze. And that what we found is that if we took a moment, took a step back, listened to our fears, brought other people in, that we found that we actually had more options than we thought we did. So in one particularly rough moment, we were getting a lot of pushback from the political establishment here in West Virginia. And it was just like a new online attack every week, people threatening our tax status and so on and so forth. We actually, and we were just sort of, our tiny staff was just sort of feeling the brunt of it. We said, we need to call more people into this. So we brought a group of our top leaders and volunteers together, and we just spent a whole day saying, what are we afraid of? And how do we address those fears other than just fighting back or doing nothing? And we just put a piece of paper up on the board and had people brainstorm and encourage folks to get creative, listen to your fears, listen to your ideas. And you'll see in the chat, at the very top of the chat, I included a link. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. A link to an article that came out of that brainstorm session that tried to name a few choices we can make other than just fight, flight, and freeze. So we added things like humor. We added things like ignore. We could just choose to ignore a threat. We can use it for fuel. One of the things we still do in our work every now and then is when we get a particular kind of attack, we might screenshot it and share it around, laugh at it, and use it as fuel for our organizing. In some cases, we found that the reason why an attack stung is because we thought that the person might actually be with us. And so we said one option we have instead of fight, flight, or freeze, if we listen to our fear, is that we can make an invitation. We can invite this person into a conversation. In other cases, that's the opposite of what we want to do. In some cases, we can apologize. And then one I'll tell a quick story on that came out of this brainstorm, which we've used a number of times since, is with a candidate of ours who's just getting really nasty online bigotry thrown their way. They were running for office, and they were tired of doing just the sort of respectable and respectful, sort of polite ignoring. And they decided, I'm going to fundraise off of this. So they screenshotted some of the worst stuff, sent it to their supporter list, and said, please make a donation on behalf of this bigot. Right? Now, again, sometimes that's not going to be what we choose to do. There are reasons why we thought that would not escalate the situation in that case. But it's a reminder to us that we have more, our fears can be a reminder to us that we have more choices than to just fight, flight, or freeze. I want to offer one other example of what it looks like to listen to our fears. One of the things we built into our process is that whenever one of our candidates or harm reductionists or organizers or journalists is under attack, we sort of developed an expectation that the first thing that happens is that we get on the phone with them and really just listen to what exactly is going on, because we found that oftentimes the thing that people think they want at first is sort of some sort of hard skill security training, right? It gets to that those ideas that have been ingrained in us over years and years of watching television. And that what we found is that by doing those initial one-on-one conversations, what we often find is that that's actually not the thing the person most needs at all. It's just the first thing that came to mind. For instance, we had one city councilor who was fearing for her electoral well-being, fearing for what might happen to her publicly, because she was pretty sure she had witnessed someone trying to bribe her and another city council. Instinct was like, I'm person to her situation. We actually realized that a sort of direct security threat was not the thing that scared her most, but that what she was worried about was what her legal options were and what her communications options were. And so rather than funneling her towards our security team, we ended up finding a lawyer to serve as a sort of volunteer attorney to do some research for her, and some communications folks who could sort of walk through the basics of crisis communications. And the only reason we got there is because rather than jumping to a reaction, we listened to what she was actually up against and afraid of. Okay, so that's lesson number one, or learning number one. I'm going to take a 1 minute break, go back to your sheet of paper with the threat that you might be facing. And I'm going to invite you to think about this idea of listening to our fears and the different choices we have, and scribble down some notes about what you might take from that into your situation. Just scribble down some notes. Then we'll go on to the next one, have a break, next one, have a break, next one, and then we'll split up in groups. So take a minute or two, just reflect a little bit on your own situation, scribble down some notes, and we'll go on to number two. Okay, next up, we're going to do this a little bit out of order. Instead of relying on outside expertise, we realized that we had a lot of wisdom and experience inside our organizations if we were willing to take the time to look. I'll give you a couple examples of what that looks like. One of the things we found early on in the security program is that, sort of as I was alluding to before, the main thing that most of our people dealt with when they were in danger was damage to their mental health as much as it was sort of immediate physical danger. And we realized very quickly that our elected officials, our organizers, our volunteers did not have access to reliable, affordable mental health care. And we knew that we weren't going to win that by some, lobbying campaign at the state government anytime soon. So we sort of tapped in and said, what could we provide our organization? Like, we know people who do mental health work. We know mental health counselors and pastors and other people who provide this service. And we did what we do. We organized, we listened to our networks, we tapped into our networks and built a mental health program, which is also in the links that I shared, where we now have 7 or 8 counselors, certified counselors in a wide range of counseling traditions who will offer, they sort of set aside 1 or 2 of their slots at any given time for West Virginia Can't Wait folks. We hand over to anyone in our network who needs mental health services this list of providers. They call them up, they say, I'm with West Virginia Can't Wait. And the provider offers them services at no charge. Now, we never know when that happens because of HIPAA. So the relationship exists entirely between our person and the provider. But now we are able to guarantee, because of tapping into the experience and the expertise that we already had inside of our movement, all of our elected officials, all of our candidates, all of our volunteers who need it, free mental health care, really good mental health care from someone who wants to be providing it and who at some basic level shares our values. So that's one example of what it has looked like for us to tap into the wisdom and experience that we already have. Another example of this was this organization called Project Rainbow, where as a group of harm reductionists and people who use drugs and people in recovery and members of the LGBTQ+ community identified that there was no explicitly LGBTQ+ friendly shelter in all of West Virginia. And they spent a little bit of time researching what would it look like to advocate, to encourage someone else to go start one. But they finally realized that they weren't going to trust anyone who would do it. And so we had to do it ourselves. And that meant taking more time on the front end to find the expertise that we had, whether that was relying on people who had lived in shelters and their personal experience, whether it meant tapping into the experience and knowledge and wealth of local landowners who might offer us a free space, whether it was crowdfunding some of the initial rent, whether it was finding allies inside local and statewide anti-homelessness organizations. But we just realized that we had more capacity than we thought we did to even do something as bold as opening this group opening its own shelter. Maybe a couple other quick examples I'll give in this regard. And you'll notice pictures that are up here. Some of you may recognize them. These are John Brown in the upper right-hand corner, a West Virginia hero, Mother Jones, some of the miners who were part of the Miners' March 100 years ago and the mine wars. That one of the things we often go back to in our work, and it's partly about how we feel safe, is that we try to tell the stories and tap into and share with each other the stories of the people who have come before us as a reminder of what people have been able to survive in the past, and a reminder that we have that resilience inside of our collective experience. And then one last example I'll give, sort of a quick one, but you can read more about it in the links, is we wanted to create a training, a community defender training for our people so that we'd have a broader network of folks who could provide these sort of safety and security services. And we went into it thinking we were going to have to get a bunch of outside experts. But once again, when we started to plumb our own networks and who knows who, we realized we've got people who have self-defense training in our networks. We've got people with serious mental health background that can do a training on community mental health and resilience. We have lawyers in our network who can do trainings on how to work with police officers. We have organizers who can talk about introduction to strategic nonviolence. And over and over and over again, we found that we could build the thing we need. So I'm going to break You're gonna get a couple minutes this time. And for this one, I want to offer a very specific prompt, which is one of the main ideas that we keep coming back to, you'll hear me say it a dozen times on this training, is that this safety and security work belongs to all of us. And that even if we don't have all the formal training in the world, each of us brings something that is valuable to making other people feel safe. And so the challenge in these next couple minutes, as you're looking at your situation and your threat, is to think about one skill that you have, one skill that each of us has. It can be anything you want. I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at fundraising, whatever. Come up with one thing you know you're good at, and imagine what it would look like to translate that skill towards safety and defense and security in your organization or in your situation. So put yourself in the scenario. What's something you're good at that could be used to further safety and security? And if you come up with that, then start thinking about other people on your team and what they bring. We'll come back in 2 minutes. Okay. Can we hear a couple? This is an opportunity to brag on yourself, but tell us what's one thing that you realized. Yes, Amy, go ahead.
Hi. So I'm actually out here in rural Missouri doing abortion work. And part of my job is to go talk to business owners and like just approach them. So I have had to learn very quickly, like almost like a formula for conversation and know how to react based on the response I get, and be out that door if I need to. So
Beautiful. And how might you use that skill in furthering your own safety and security? It sounds like you're already doing it to some regard, but are there other ways that
yeah, so I haven't I've been out here doing these conversations I've been doing advocacy for 10 years here and these conversations for 2. And it really is based on how the person reacts, because we don't need the violence. So I just kind of get out of there really quickly and politely. If it's, if it's going to go south. and that I'm actually getting my first volunteers, and I'll be, training them on how to have those conversations too. And that is a big safety concern because right now I work alone. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like both the skill of doing the conversations and the skill of training is something that can make you more powerful, more able to reach more folks. It also sounds like what some safety professionals might call the skill you just described is de-escalation. It's like the ability to take a situation that might be hot and make it cooler. And de-escalation skills can be super transferable. Thank you, Amy.
I'm doing training in nonviolent communication and restorative practices for that reason. Yeah.
That's great. It sounds like you're already doing the thing. That's terrific. Let's hear from one more person. What's something that you realized, a skill you've got that could be translated to your safety and security work? Okay.
Is everybody being quiet?
It appears so, Len. Go for it.
My basic skill is, I don't want to brag on myself, but is my analytical mind. I can sit there, I can look at a situation, see and decipher very quickly what is the best way to de-escalate that situation, or what is the next best course of action. So, and that's an important tool, I feel, to teach other people on how to do it. One of the issues we have in rural Georgia right now is because of the open carry gun laws, the without a permit, with the protect your castle laws, is especially in the rural, outside the city areas of going door to door. A lot of people don't want to do that because right now people are shooting first and asking questions later. Even if you pull down their driveway, which is a bad situation. So we're cognizant of that, and we protect where we send any of our canvassers.
Thank you for that, Len. Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff there. I especially like the idea of using an analytical mind. That I think one of the things I'll mention in this next section probably is oftentimes the simplest thing we do in order to make ourselves safer is just to rehearse a thing before we do it. So whether it's an action or a program or a new project or a press conference where we think there might be some static, we just rehearse it. We do it once behind the scenes, and we invite people who have good analytical minds to say, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen here? And just like do a little role playing, a little rehearsing, so that we've imagined out some of those worst case scenarios ahead of time. And people with good analytical minds and issue spotting minds can be very valuable for that. Okay, let's keep going. Number 3, instead of a lone hero or protector, we are going to lean on a community of support. I think this one is sort of obvious in what it means, so I'm not going to explain it too much, but I do want to give 2 examples. With one candidate who is getting a lot of threats, she came to us, elected official came to us, and she was really worried because city council meetings were getting really heated. And there was a fear that violence could break out at the city council meeting, and that she might be targeted. And that was the fear. And a little bit of analysis, a little bit of working with some of the folks that we worked with who have more experience in this area, sort of worked with her to identify where she was actually most vulnerable. Because at a city council meeting, there's a bunch of other witnesses, there's security, there are reasons to believe that that's actually a place where she wasn't going to be vulnerable, but that instead, perhaps walking home from that city council meeting, she would be quite vulnerable. And that thinking about what are the moments when she was alone, and then who is the community of support that could work with her. So rather than focusing on where the fear was the greatest, we sort of focused on how do we make sure that at all times, especially the most vulnerable times, after a council meeting, late at night, walking home, that she had a community of support. And we were able to tap in and say, well, safety in that circumstance may literally just be 2 or 3 people walking home with you. And we were able to address that fundamental fear with a fairly simple solution. Another example, similar to an example that was given earlier on this call, was that I think one way a group came to us that was planning an event, a pro-abortion group was planning an event, and they were worried about sort of event security. And their first instinct was, all right, do you guys have a security professional, someone who can, do we need a metal detector, someone at the front door checking bags, etc. And we could sort of tell that's not what they really wanted, but it was the idea of security that they were aware of. And that instead we encouraged them and worked with them, similar to the example that was given about church security earlier, that a much more effective form of model of security is to, instead of one person, one entry port, making everyone feel scared, surprise, surprise, that doesn't help people feel safe. instead to have a team of 3 to 6 people, depending on the size of the event, where roughly half of that team is at the front of the event, and like very sort of overly welcoming, right? Every single person who comes in, thanks so much for being here. How'd you hear about this? And they're finding out information about who's there. They're gaining information. They're welcoming people. So everyone feels welcome, and they're in a position to identify if someone is acting oddly or suspiciously or unsafely. And maybe that means that there's a threat, or maybe it just means that the person's uncomfortable and there's other ways to meet that discomfort. And then you have the other half of the team mingling throughout the event, able to communicate with other members and spotting other things that seem unusual. That is a response that requires a community of support rather than a lone hero or protector. And that community of support can be doing positive good in addition to just defending against the worst case scenario. Okay. We do 1 minute break this time. So you're going to take this idea of a community of support back to your situation, maybe scribble some notes, and we'll come back together in 1 minute. All right, I'm gonna welcome folks back. We've got one more of these little observations to go through, and then we're gonna get a chance to break into groups and talk about our individual circumstances and what might work. Okay, so finally, instead of react and strike, we might choose avoid and prevent. And this is one of the things that I learned early on in our work here that just made so much sense, that I think I even went into it, into this work, into these questions, feeling ill-equipped because I had an idea that security was about being able to defend myself in physical violence, or to fight well, or to fight back well. And our security captain, who's done an amazing job over the last few years of just training himself on all of the like best security techniques around the world, and other people who've done this work. He brought this idea, which apparently is a fairly simple idea in security culture. It calls the 5D perimeter solution, which basically says, before we get to self-defense, before we get to the moment where we're having to fight back, we are going to try at least 4 other things first. And that's the sort of layers of the onion on this chart. We can choose to deter, we can choose to detect, we can choose to delay, or we can choose to deny. One way our security captain put this, which I really appreciated, he's like, you know, if there's a situation of danger that you're facing, oftentimes the best thing you can do is run away. That like just finding ways to avoid physical conflict and then figuring out the rest later is often our best bet. So we can make choices to avoid and prevent. Here's a couple examples of what that has looked like for us. Maybe this resonates with some of y'all as well. I mentioned earlier that one of the main issues we work on is harm reduction. and that a lot of harm reduction, all CDC recommended harm reduction work in West Virginia, almost all of it, has been criminalized over the last few years, specifically syringe service programs, needle exchanges. And so we're used to have thousands of people a week across the state being able to go to their health departments, et cetera, to get clean syringes and Narcan and access to healthcare. A couple of those programs have been able to stay alive in this new legal reality, but most of them have shut down. And so there was this problem for people who wanted to continue to save lives to say, what is our opportunity? Because if we keep doing that normal thing where we show up and we offer people services, police or the state government will shut us down, or local police will fine us or even arrest us. What's the alternative? And some of those programs, and this is not an idea we came up with, but from listening to folks around the country and around the world, have chosen to move to a peer-to-peer model where you find people who are actively using drugs and who need safe needles, and you find ways to distribute those syringes to them so they can distribute to other folks. Now, our organization doesn't do that directly, but we're proud of the people in West Virginia who are finding ways to distribute clean syringes and Narcan and naloxone in a peer-to-peer way to avoid and prevent any conflict with law enforcement at all. Rather than thinking about it as how do we defend ourselves against them, it's how do we find a way to get people what they need without having to do that encounter at all. We see a similar thing happen. I imagine this is true in some of your states as well, with the criminalization of abortion, where there are a lot of organizations and hotlines, some of which we've worked with closely, that are going out of their way to find ways to get people safely to other states, not to invite conflict in West Virginia by providing abortions and having police or law enforcement shut it down, but by finding creative, caring ways to get people safely to out-of-state services in a way that doesn't draw attention from law enforcement, again, as a way to avoid and prevent conflict. The last example I'll give of this is just something mentioned earlier, but oftentimes the best way to sort of imagine out these delay, detect, deny options is just by using the tool of rehearsal, of taking any upcoming event or protest or program launch or whatever and role playing it a few times to imagine what our opponents will do and try to figure out if there's a way to neutralize them without having to ever get into physical conflict at all. All right, this is your last 1 minute break to take some of maybe some of these avoid and prevent strategies into your own situation, and then we'll come back together and get a chance to discuss more. So one more 1 minute break. All right, y'all, I think we're ready to put this into action. So what's going to happen next is that we are going to get sorted into groups of 4. I know there's some people who are just observing, but we're going to ask everyone who's able to come off mute and to come off video and to participate in this session. And in the previous times we've done this workshop, these next 10 or 12 minutes tend to be by far the most valuable. So if you've been listening up until this point, I hope you'll come off of mute, and if you want, share video as well. We're gonna be in groups of 4, and we're gonna have about we'll try about 12 minutes. So each person will have about 3 minutes to present the threat they're facing in whatever terms they want. You can, if you're afraid to talk about it in explicit terms, just offer it in vague terms. So you're going to present the threat. You're going to present 2 or 3 ideas that you've come up with that you might be able to employ to feel safer. And then you're going to ask the group if you have particular questions. So again, it's present the threat, present some possible responses, and then ask the group for feedback. So just to be very clear, this is not a chance for us to armchair quarterback, right? It's not a chance to walk in there and say, well, you know what you should really do, or why haven't you done this? This is a chance to offer a little bit of a safe space for people to say, this is what I'm up against, this is what I'm thinking about, and then for them to ask us. So if someone asks, what do you think I should do? Or what do you think about this idea? Of course, you're welcome to say it, but we're not gonna go into these sessions to finger wag or instruct, but to sort of hear each other out, offer some encouragement, and respond to questions that might be asked. So again, it's about a 3-minute spotlight on each person. You'll go around. If you get done with that before the 12 minutes is up and you want to go around the second time and have people talk about other things they're facing or other things they want to try, you're welcome to do that. But then we'll come back together about 12 minutes later. If you only have 3 people in your group, just do it with 3 people. That's okay too. Let me see if there are questions, and then Sean, if you want to sort of start divvying people up into those groups, we'll do that. But are there questions about what we're about to do?
Three things again, please.
Yep. So each person is going to get a chance to go. Great question. The first thing that person will do is to describe the threat or threats they're facing. The second thing they'll do is to describe 2 or 3 ideas, tactics, responses that they might want to try. It could be something they've already tried. It could be something from this presentation. It could be something that just occurred to them as we've been talking for the last hour. And then number 3 is that they'll get a chance to ask for feedback from the group. So for instance, I might say, I'm dealing with the criminalization of harm reductionists in my hometown. 2 things we're thinking about trying are peer-to-peer distribution of Narcan and naloxone, and we're also going to offer a sort of volunteer training for people to know their rights about the new law. And that's what we're going to do, those 2 things. And then the third thing is I can ask for feedback. So I might say, has anyone else heard of any good ideas that we might be able to do in a harm reduction situation? That's it. And then when that person's had a chance to go, you'll pass it on to the next person and go around the circle. Great question. Any other questions about what we're about to do? I'm going to leave up. Actually, I don't know if it will follow you into the rooms, but if anyone wants to take a final look, these are the summary of the 4 little lessons or learnings. One last thing I want to offer, because I think this could be scary about saying some of these things out loud. We always try to remind ourselves that safety and security work is not about completely erasing danger. That actually danger is the fact. The danger is the thing we can't change. Like, by doing the brave work that we're doing, we will experience threats and danger. We can't erase that. What we're talking about is, given that fact, how can we feel safer? How can the people we're working with feel safer so that we can continue to do the work that we know needs done? So you might be sitting there going, I don't know if my idea is good enough. I don't think it's going to answer this, or I don't think it's going to eliminate my opponent being mad at me. You're right, it's not. And so the stakes are in some ways are a little bit lower. Like, you don't have to go into this. We don't have to go into this feeling like we have to know everything or completely neutralize our opponent's attacks or criticism. They're our opponents. They are going to continue attacking us. What this is about is, how can we make a few decisions that make us and our people feel safer so we can continue to do the work? So just wanted to offer that encouragement, is that's the bar we're trying to meet, not erasing the danger, but minimizing it, reducing it, allowing us to feel safer and freer to do the work we want to do as best we can. All right. With that, I'm going to encourage folks to enter your meeting group here in a moment, and to take about 12 minutes, and then we'll reconvene. We'll bring y'all back about 8:19, 8:20, and we'll have a chance to debrief, answer some questions, talk next steps, and we should finish a little bit before 9. Sean, any announcements about how this is going to work?
Nope, you should see a message on your screen that says join your group, and just press that message and you should go.
I'm going to go get some medicine. I'll be back.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this while you're so sick.
I'm having so much fun, and I definitely underestimated the condition my voice was in. So thanks for bearing with me.
Of course.
let's click the little thing to bring people back at 8:19, and that way we'll actually have them back by 8:20.
Okay, great.
All right, John, let's go ahead and bring folks back. Welcome back, y'all. We're gonna give people another few seconds to rejoin us. Hope the conversations were good. I imagine maybe they weren't quite long enough, but
No,
we're glad to get you back. We're gonna take a little bit of time to debrief, sort of hear what happened in those conversations. We're also not going to get as much time as we would want. So just a fair warning that we won't get to every single excellent point or question that emerged, but we do want to hear some. So as folks are getting back into the room, I think the first question I want to start with is just to open the floor for folks to get a chance to brag on someone in your group. So we had a chance to brag on ourselves a little bit earlier. This is a chance to say, I was in a group with this person, and they had a really good idea. This person. And then share it with the rest of us. Andy, get us started.
Sure. So I was in a group with Len, and he gave a really, really great piece of advice that I think probably works with a lot of folks. Is to, if your organization is a local organization or something like that, is to join the Chamber of Commerce. Because a lot of times the Chamber of Commerce controls that local Republican politics. It does where I am, for sure. And it's just not something I ever even considered the possibility of doing. And that's how you can start reaching out and showing some of these Republican leaders that you're not a baby eating evil demon of a Democrat. So I thought that was a great idea. So thanks, Len.
Bravo, Andy. Bravo, Len. Let's hear.
You're welcome, Andy. You didn't have to use my example though, baby eating and blood drinking.
Well,
let's hear a couple others. Something else that came up in your group. Maybe it's something we've even talked about before, but somebody who had an idea you want to shout out or lift up. You may need to come off of mute to do so.
I just want to say I was in a group with Ginny who was reflecting on an experience that they had had where they could see that they were already living some of these practices, and that was really beautiful to see.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Spencer. Would you mind saying more about why that was meaningful to you, or what that sort of kicked up for you?
Yeah, I think related to the point that one of the 4 points you had around like the wisdom of generations, I think we all have the capacity to do this work and bring our perspective and bring a lot of value to it. And it's nice to see that even maybe we didn't have the words to articulate that that's what we were doing or how we were trying to frame it, but we're all moving in that direction and we want to go there together.
Thank you for saying that. It's one of the main things that we keep coming back to in our own work, and we have to remind ourselves over and over again. We do this workshop where we have people like this was a workshop created by Training for Change and my partner in crime, Katie Lauer, where folks are asked to sort of imagine the threat they're up against, have someone else physically act out that threat, and then sort of react to the other person acting it out, so that you sort of watch what your body does. And oftentimes when we do that, the first reaction is something we don't like. So if we close up, we're like, oh, I wish I didn't close up. Or if we run away, we're like, I wish we didn't run away. Our first instinct is so often to criticize our own instincts and to criticize our own backgrounds. And we always try to take a moment in those trainings to be like, what was the piece of wisdom about closing in? Or what was the piece of wisdom about hiding? We did this activity recently, and one of our leaders was really frustrated. She said, my first reaction was to get really small and to be small, and I don't want to be small. And we sort of talked through it, and it became like the watchword for the whole training is like, being small is strategic, right? That like there's all kinds of opportunities that come from being small. And so I just thank you for making that point, Spencer, and to the person in your group who raised it. Let's hear one or two more things that someone in your group said that resonated with Gen Z. Gen Z?
Yeah, Gen Z. Thank you. I just wanted to give Murray a shout out. I think that Liz and I both found that some of the things that Murray shared really resonated, and I couldn't say it as good as Murray himself, so I will pass it back to Murray to talk about it, but it was really helpful.
Thanks, Jency. Murray, you don't have to speak up if you don't want to, but if you'd like to share some of what you shared with your small group, we'd welcome it.
Sure, I can do that briefly. One of the things I shared was especially important to interact with your neighbors and the people you know, because they're the ones you spend the most time with. And I used an example. I'm teaching, and I'm teaching a driver ed class, and it's some ways away, and on my way home today, I stopped at a gas station, and when I went in there, there's a very, very staunch Trump supporter. He drives around with Trump plastered all over the side of his car. And yet when he greeted me, hi, how are you? I haven't seen you for a while. And it was very genuine. He can be very friendly, and we have a good relationship that way. So even though we're on far ends of the spectrum, we still are able to interact like that. So sometimes I think that's like getting your foot in the door a little bit. And that's one of the things we're trying to do, is to encourage people to be a trusted friend and a trusted neighbor, even if you disagree on certain things, and that can be a way to help move forward rather than just immediately clash with each other and those type of things. So that's one example.
Thanks, Murray. Yeah, we often say that when we separate ourselves from other people, other working class people, our neighbors, we are doing our opponent's work for them. There's obviously exceptions to that, but thank you for that example. Let's hear one more. These are great. One more shout out or appreciation of someone else in your group.
Carol Ann,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, I don't see how to raise my hand here with reactions. So,
Oh, go ahead,
can I
Carol.
go a little on a tangent here?
Yes.
And say something and just follow on what Murray said. Just to draw the parallel, years ago, my mother was married to a psychopath, and I realized things were wrong. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to keep fighting this. And when the morning comes, when you wake up and realize you want to get out, I'm there for you. And I promise you, I'll never tell you I told you so. So last Thursday, after the verdicts came down against Trump, I went out on a plea on my Facebook to everyone and said, now, folks, as some people are going to start waking up to what they've been a part of and they no longer want to be a part of, we need to think of this as a loved one who has left a domestic violence situation that we welcome with open arms and never say, I told you so. We welcome them back. So building on what Murray said, every time he meets the guy at the gas station, they don't have to get into Trump this or Biden that. Just, be neighbors. And we can do that for others, I think, and let them know, as they come around with questions. We don't say, you could have listened to me. We just say, even though they didn't do it to us, which is no reason for us to do it back to them, we can be understanding.
Thanks, Carolyn. Amy.
Hi. Actually, building on that, because I liked that topic in my group as well. And I kind of like seeing that as a theme in rural areas. I was talking, oh my gosh, I can't remember. I'm bad with names sometimes. Arizona. And, we talked about, finding a language that's common to use. When I talk about climate change, I talk about self-sufficient communities. And like these really basic ideas that are culturally appropriate for my area. But like, we find that common ground and give grace. I know as that I was talking about as a genderqueer person, doing rural abortion work, there's a lot of grace that I have to turn around and give. And that's just a part of it if we want growth and change, and I liked that his recognition, because I think for both him and myself, we are working on, visibility. And it does feel like we're facing mountains sometimes, but we got to give grace because we're fighting for change. We know that the odds are against us on winning. So that's not our goal. Our goal is change. So anyway, I liked that. And I like just kind of hearing the general atmosphere in the room. That's all.
Thank you. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Let's hear one more if there is one more.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to stay along those lines that everybody's talking about. One thing that I've found that's really helpful is that, you've got to have open communication with the other side. And one of the things you find when you have open communication is don't make it combative, but talk about values. And they'll find out pretty soon that your values align pretty much with their values for the most part. And that really helped break down walls.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One of the things that we talk about a lot is the power of invitation. That we're always that I think, at least in West Virginia, the political culture we see is one that prioritizes talking at or down to people, and that if instead we do what our grandparents told us and remind us that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, that if we're curious and we listen, chances are we're going to find things we agree on. The way West Virginia Can't Wait's policy platform was built was by doing 11,000 conversations, just like the ones y'all are talking about. And we didn't ask people what party they were in, or we just said, what's the first thing you would do for the people you love if you were governor? And when you ask the question that way and give people a chance to stick up for the people they love and care about, rather than what often gets asked, which is like, what is your number one issue? Or what often comes up is like, who do you want to punish, right? But when we ask, like, what's something you would do for someone you love, if you had the power to do so, no one answered. Literally, no one said, I would restrict the access of transgender people, or I would criminalize abortion, because people know that doesn't actually help the people they love. So just appreciate all of the wisdom on this call about the power of invitation and curiosity. We have a little bit of time left. I do want to open the floor for any sort of stray thoughts. We start moving in this direction anyway. Stray thoughts or questions people have about the training before we get off. We have about 20 minutes of wrapping up to do. But before we get into that, I wanted to see if there are burning questions or ideas that you really want to get out there before we shift to wrap up. Yes, Paul.
Yeah.
My cousin, Paul Smith.
My son, Stephen Smith.
No way.
Yes. With a PhD. Yeah, I want to, the communication, there's a tool there that you can use to de-escalate threats, and it's listening. I've found that when I've been confronted, and I'm in a very red area and there are a lot of extremists, I found that when I'm confronted by them, if I ask them to clarify points with what I really want to understand what you mean. What are you talking about? A lot of them, and I'm going to say 50%, get frustrated that I'm not coming back at them to attack, that I'm really trying to understand. And to really be an effective communicator, you need to listen to people. And I do this in public, not with knowing that what's important isn't the confrontation between the two of us, it's the people around us, what they're observing, how they're seeing me handle myself as I'm a Democrat, and when I'm being attacked like that. And I think it's really important to really try to understand what people, because like you said, they may have a concern that's personal to them, but they come across with the noise they've heard on the media. And when you ask them, well, can you give me an example of how that's affecting you? And they get into the personal, they find out we have a lot in common. There really is no us and them. It's just us. We're all Americans. Some of us choose to be an independent, Republican, Democrat, Green Party, whatever. That's our right. So we all have that right, and I respect that right. And so it's great when you can actually have somebody confront you and have a meaningful conversation. But even more importantly is what the people around you observe during the time you're having that conversation.
Thanks for that, Paul. It reminds me of something that was said earlier about just like that we get to choose to live out our own values of grace and listening, that we just don't have to play the game that our opponents want us to play. I'm going to give the last question or thought to Spencer before we transition to the wrap up. Take it away, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering how, are there other ways that you could describe how you build like capacity and support for community resilience and for healing for people who are engaged in safety?
Yeah, can you, I can give a couple possible ways to answer the question. Do you mind saying a little bit more about what you're looking for?
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking, like, I don't understand totally how things work with your org, so I apologize if I'm mischaracterizing it, but the people who are maybe surrounding the elected official and are like, or welcoming people into the space, and how do you support them and like help build resilience? Because I know how difficult that can be, especially if there was a moment, you know, where something scary happened or violence or anything.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I hear part of your question is sort of how do you get started, right? Like there's sort of one thing about how we might do it 4 or 5 years into this project. Am I right that part of what you're asking is sort of how do you get started doing that? Is that?
Maybe not for me personally, but I think that could be very valuable.
Okay, well, I'll try to answer both ways. I think in terms of getting started, there's just a huge value in bringing 1 or 2 people with you as you walk into a void. That I just think that's how we did it. As we talked to other groups, that there's just a huge value to being the first 2 or 3 people to act courageously in a scary situation. Again, not to do so by yourself if you can, but to find 1 buddy or 2 buddies and walk into a situation of danger, whether it's a candidate who's getting threatened. It might be something as simple as like, I see this candidate getting threatened. I care about them. I'm going to call up a friend of mine who also cares about this person. And we're going to set up a meeting with this candidate to say, what are you dealing with? How can we help? And just, as has been mentioned a bunch of times, listening and coming up with a plan that meets the moment and learning and evaluating as you go. So I think that's one way to answer the question is literally find a buddy or 2, throw yourself into it, make mistakes, evaluate them as you go. I think if you're looking for like that specific instance and it's something you're looking for something more formal, there are resources out there that are more formal. So maybe this is a good segue to what we're going to talk about next. I mentioned our security captain earlier, who after doing this work as a volunteer and educating himself over 3 or 4 years, he's built up a practice. And so one thing you can do is reach out to him and say, hey, we're dealing with this. Would you be willing to do a consultation with us? Or do you know someone near us who would? So that's another way to kind of get initial help when you're getting off the ground. I think another way to kind of meet a particular moment like the one you're describing is to find someone locally who has some expertise. So maybe they aren't a security professional, but maybe they're a criminal defense attorney, or maybe they're a mental health professional, and they may not know everything, but they know a little bit more than we do, maybe. And we found some luck in, we see a problem, we see someone who knows something about that problem, an attorney, a community mental health provider, a security professional, whatever it might be, and then we host a little workshop. We invite that person to come and do, an hour-and-a-half presentation like the one we're doing tonight for some small group of people. And then after the presentation, we invite that group of people to do a little house meeting that says, hey, how do we want to keep involved, or how do we want to respond? And that oftentimes just creating the excuse or the space for people to start problem solving. It's cool to watch how sometimes folks will just sort of walk into that space. Does that make sense? In the chat, so we're going to do a few things by way of wrap up, and we're going to finish before 9 o'clock. It's late for those of you on the East Coast, before 9 o'clock. So we're going to do first, we're going to do one more moment of silence. And with this moment, look back over your notes. You've been scribbling notes and observations throughout the training. And the invitation is to put in the chat one action that you are going to take from today. So this is not like a lesson learned. We're going to do that at the end. But this is more like a thing I'm going to do. And this is a chance to say it to the world in the chat. So it could be like, I'm going to follow up with Amy about their cool idea, or I'm going to follow up with Sean about such and such, or I'm going to reach out to this candidate in my backyard and offer to help. Can be something big, something small. I'm going to read a book about safety. Whatever it is, one action that you hope to take after today, and just throw it into the chat, and we'll get to see some of these cool things. I'm going to rejoin the chamber. Just going to read some of these off. What is one thing you do for someone you love? I'm going to share what I learned with my team. Thank you, Allison. That's great. I'm going to share the main points with my organizing team. Thank you, Nina. Great. I'm going to recruit a large welcoming committee for in-person events. Invite people to share and practice from real examples they are threatened at our next planning meeting. These are awesome, y'all. Okay. Terrific. Keep putting those in the chat if you want. A couple final things, and we'll get out of here. So I'm going to ask people, actually give you a few minutes right now to take this survey. It's in the chat. I'm going to put it back in the chat. And okay, here you go. So here's the survey again. I'm giving people a few minutes to fill this out right now before we wrap up. And I'm going to make 3 arguments for why I hope you'll fill out this survey, because surveys can be boring, but this one really matters to us. So one reason is to pay this experience forward. We're always reviewing the trainings and trying to learn and do better. And so by taking a moment to fill this out, you'll be helping us out in the future. Second, to help make sure that your state and community is represented, you'll see that part of the survey is questions about what kinds of threats you're facing most. And this is actually a really valuable experience to get data from people who are willing to make time on a Wednesday night for a training like this. So help us make sure your state is represented in that survey. And then finally, I think I speak for Sean as well. It is our very distinct hope that many of you will apply for this more intensive rural defender training that we're planning, hoping, fingers crossed, to launch an application form in July, and that will start in August. And by filling out the survey, there's a question that says, do you want to hear about that? And so that's a great way to make sure that we follow up with you personally when that application is alive, or it's a way to, we can follow up with you if you're interested in it. We can also follow up with you if you want to share it with folks. If you're interested in learning more about that, that's a third reason to fill out the survey. So I'm going to shut up, give you a few minutes to start filling these out. We found that if people fill them out here in this moment right now, it'll get done. And if we try to remember to do it later tonight or tomorrow when life is interrupting us, it's harder to do. So I'm going to take next few minutes to give you all a chance to fill out those surveys. Then we'll do a couple more things and end before. Sean, if you figured out how to do the computer audio, we could do a song now too, if you want. I still have not figured out how to do it.
Are folks able, are folks able to open the survey?
I was able.
I see some nodding. Awesome. I can see that a few of you have already filled it out, which I appreciate. Take a couple more minutes. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to thank you for tonight. I need to get out. My wife's outside yelling at me.
Nice to meet you, Paul. There's my contact information is in the chat. We'll talk more if folks want to reach out. You're welcome to reach out as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
For those that are having a hard time, it could be that your bandwidth constraints. So after the session, you may be able to open the survey.
Thanks. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and wrap, and then if folks are able to give it another shot, I'd appreciate it. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Two last things. This is my contact information, Steven@wvcantwait.com. That's my cell phone number. I'm going to be on the road much of the rest of this month. But my offer to everyone on this call is, if you are interested in this stuff and you want someone to bounce ideas off of, I would be happy to talk. So you can reach out to me at any time. You can reach out to me in the next few weeks, and we'll probably schedule a time for later this summer, or reach out to me in a month or 6 months or whenever. We often don't know when when these threats will emerge, and would love to hear from anyone on this call anytime, just to brainstorm. The last thing we're going to do is hear from a few people. Let's see if we can find 3 people to offer one lesson or phrase that someone uttered today that you're going to take with you from this. So sort of a follow-up on our conversation about an action we might take. This is a lesson learned or a phrase you want to take from tonight. We'll hear from 3 or 4 people, and then we'll wrap a little before 9, and maybe that'll give people a chance to fill out the survey then. Andy, go ahead and unmute yourself. You can be our first one.
Sorry. So it's more something that kind of coalesced with a lot of things I was hearing is, you know, obviously I'm an organizer, so relational organizing, using your family and friends to help, and also, you know, make sure that, you know, you're going to be safe and secure as, you know, and it brought me back to an event I did. I was the, I helped plan a gubernatorial launch here in California. And one of the things we did was, it crystallized for me was when you mentioned, you know, having the volunteers welcoming people and things like that. That is something that we actually did. And we had people in the crowd that were ready to, hey, if anything starts to happen, you know, that were ready, that were looking for that. But they weren't, you know, police officers, or they were just our volunteers. And the other thing we did was we built the attendance list. We only invited people that we knew, or the people that we invited knew. So it was, you know, this big relational organizing thing, and everybody was afraid we weren't going to get enough people, but we got about 600 people there. And but as a consequence, you know, one of my greatest pride was there was no incidents. There were no incidents. Nothing happened, and it was wonderful. And it was because we used that relational organizing that I think so many people were talking about today, and what you were talking about. And so once again, relational organizing is just it never occurred to me that it could be just safety and security is another way that it would help. So
Beautiful. I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Andy. Let's hear from Karen, and then we'll do one more person after Karen.
Thank you, Stephen. I was encouraged to hear Len talk about using values in conversation, freedom, justice, opportunity, to reach common ground with people we encounter, because those are American values. They're not just democratic values. So we use those terms to begin conversations to reach common ground.
Beautiful. Thanks, Karen. Let's hear one more person, a lesson learned or a phrase that's sticking with you. Hearing none, let's end even earlier than we expected. Thank you all so much for this evening, for bearing with me as I was a little under the weather. It is so inspiring to just get to spend a couple hours with y'all, and I hope to have the chance to spend much more than these 2 hours with some of you after tonight. So please be in touch. Sean, thanks again for making this happen. This is great.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Can we come off mute and give Stephen a round of applause? That was amazing.
Woo!
That was really great. It was, and doing it while so sick. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Stay safe out there.